Igbo Gamuno. Igbo Gamuno.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to this evening conversation. I have the rare privilege to have one of the greatest Igbos still living amongst us here with me. Thank you once more and welcome to On Njenje Media TV. My name is Maazị Ezeoke. This evening, I will be looking at the topic with my guest, the great Igbo spirit, embattled Igbo, embattled world Igbo. The privilege, as I said, that I have is to have Professor Chidi Osuagwu, who is the chairman, African Future Earth Committee, former chairman, Ohaneze Igbo, Imo State Chapter. On this note, I would want to say, welcome to this conversation, Professor. Good evening, Professor.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you very much, Professor. We will start quickly. Now, Prof, before we get into the nitty-gritties of the conversation we will have today, the topic says the great Igbo spirit and embattled world Igbo. Now, if you may tell us, what is it that we can understand from the great Igbo spirit? When someone who does not or who is not Igbo, who does not understand what it means, how do you explain to that individual what we call the great Igbo spirit?
Okay, thank you very much. We started this discourse with a dance, and the dance is a Haitian dance, a dance from Haiti, and the name of the music the Kwido people were dancing is Nuse Igbo. Nuse Igbo. We are Igbo. Nuse Igbo. And it is relevant because it is within the Americas that the idea of the Igbo was probably formulated, and the idea of the great Igbo spirit was established. And Haiti, more than any other people in the world, including Igbo in Igbo land, are the protagonists of that concept of we are Igbo, and of Grand Igbo, the great Igbo spirit, which is also used by people in the southern United States. it is important to understand what that concept means, because we are used to thinking of the Igbo as some people in southeastern Nigeria. But Nuse Igbo by Haitians is saying the popular notion is not efficient. And it came about because in 1791, the people who call themselves Nation Guinean, People's Nations of the Gulf of Guinea, the black race, the Negro race, met in a forest called Boa Cayman. You can say alligator or crocodile forest, to take a decision about how to free themselves from slavery. And one of the resolutions they took, or the process, the Haitian Revolution is the most efficiently organized revolution and the greatest in all of human history, is that they studied the cultures and civilization of each African ethnic group present by name and wrote down the principles governing them. They call these principles laws, or LOA, L-O-A, as you find online. After going through all these nations, they said, we are all Africans. Our cultures and languages are similar and different to some extent or the other. But we cannot free ourselves unless we work from a common platform. And they resolved that for the purpose of the revolution, Nuse Igbo, for the purpose of black man's freedom, every black man is Igbo. And they came to this resolution because they analyzed these cultures and civilization of every African group present. And if you go online, you find them present. Those in Nigeria, you'll find the Nago were there, the Yoruba were there, the Fula were there, the Ashanti were there, the Congo, everybody was there. That was of the black race. And they decided that each of these nations, as they call themselves, have principles governing their lives. Some of them were principles that were cool, they called the voodoo principles, or principles that were petro, fiery principles. But they decided that Grand Igbo, the principle governing the Igbo nation, was stern and gentle. Stern and gentle. It combined qualities no other group had. And they decided on the basis of that, for the purpose of the revolution, Nuse Igbo. We are Igbo. And of course, again, within Nigeria, where the Igbo homeland is, people are used to calling the people in eastern Nigeria, who are mainly Isu Igbo, as the Igbo nation. That is not true. As some people had 2019, when the most distinguished traditional ruler in Black Africa this time, Oni of Ife, talked of the Igbo at Igbo Moku at Ile Ife. Those are Igbo. Some people might doubt it, but they are Igbo. Ancient Igbo stuff. Now, as we have in Igbo land, as we have in Nigeria, in the diaspora, you have a lot of Igbo. But two nations are where the most Igbos are found, where the Igbo are the plurality, that is the single largest ethnic group. And these nations are Haiti and the United States of America. And if you now look at it, the Haitians say, "No, say Igbo." We are all Igbo, all Haitians. Doesn't matter where you came from originally. In the United States of America, the Americans studied the culture and characteristic of all the Africans who were brought there from slavery and determined that the most dominant, the predominant group that should represent
Professor there, I think
African Americans.
Okay. Prof, go on. I think your connection was slightly off. Can you hear me?
They built the Igbo village. It is for this reason they built the Igbo village at the American Frontier Museum in Staunton, Virginia, to honor Black America, not just the Igbo, but because the Igbo are the predominant group, they are the representative group. So you now see that there is a word Igbo in Barbados, in Jamaica, in Martinique. You have heard of M.S. Caesar, the founder, co-founder of Negritude, is Igbo from Martinique. You heard of Franz Fanon, who wrote The Wretched of the Earth, is an Igbo, a protege and a student of M.S. Caesar. And I was, in fact, in communication with M.S. Caesar as a student in America. Now, all these are Igbo. But you now found out there is the unique spirit, Grand Igbo, the Great Igbo spirit, which was not identified or named by Igbo in Africa, or that the Igbo diaspora, particularly in Haiti, identified Grand Igbo, the Great Igbo spirit. And it will be good for people to Google Grand Igbo, G-R-A-N-I-B-O, Grand Igbo, and you will see Grand Igbo described as the mother of nations, which comes from the original event in Haiti, where it was decided that this law, this principle, should be the guiding principle of all African people. So what happened, events in Haiti and in the United States around the Igbo ended up tying the fate of the Igbo with the fate of the Black race. And this great Igbo spirit, this Grand Igbo, and they ended up putting Igbo in a position that he became target of adversaries of the Black race, particularly those who enslaved the Black race and wanted to keep them as slaves forever. The spirit that rose and said no was Grand Igbo, the Great Igbo spirit. And well, it achieved grand distinction, because what it led the Black race to do in Haiti, no race has done in world history. There has never been a time in world history that enslaved people fought, conquered the enslavers, and took over the land. It happened in Haiti. And it was championed by the great Igbo spirit.
Prof, at this point, may I interject? Now, you
Hello?
talked about, yes, Prof, can you hear me loud and clear?
Yeah.
Okay, I said at this point, may I interject? You're talking about Haiti, and yesterday we learned that there was this earthquake that killed many people in Haiti last night. And I say at this point, maybe we pay them our respect and pray for the souls of the departed ones.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I was going to propose that let's give them a minute silence. It's more than worthy to do. And that is, the earthquake is part of that vicissitude, part of that embattlement of the greater Igbo nation. Thank you.
So on that note, we'll say we'll give them a couple of seconds as a mark of respect for those who have lost their life in that earthquake in Haiti yesterday. Prof, we say, may their souls rest in peace.
In perfect peace.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
So, Prof, you may proceed now.
Okay, so, like we said, one needs to read what Napoleon wrote of his resolution to destroy the Haitians so that the black man must not march on the earth ever again. But at the end, Britain intervened in Haiti with 60,000 soldiers. And Grand Igbo led the Haitians to defeat the British. They have not figured out what hit them till today. Napoleon then sent 80,000 troops and reinforced it with 40,000 more. I don't know how many thousands went back. And that is how Haiti got its independence. After defeating the Empire of Spain, the Empire of Britain, the Empire of France. And forced Napoleon to dissolve the French Empire. Go and read up on the Louisiana Purchase, when Napoleon was forced to sell the bulk of America that belonged to France to the United States in 1803, exactly a few days after Grand Igbo led the Africans to defeat Napoleonic forces in Haiti. For this reason, Haiti had been targeted for eternal punishment. The whole world powers agreed that Haiti should be forced to pay 2 times for what the Americans paid to buy nearly 1/3 of the territory of the United States and the Louisiana Purchase. And the payment of that money by interest, with interest, has kept Haiti poor till today. And when President Aristide in 2004, the bicentennial of the independence, asked for that money to be paid back, the Western powers agreed to overthrow him. And President George Bush of the US sent the Marines to carry him and dump him in the heart of Africa, Central African Republic. That is how I met Aristide 2006 when I went to South Africa, Pretoria, South Africa, and he and his wife told me what happened and told me how his greatest pain is that he built a medical university to solve the problem of health for his people. And when the Americans invaded, they drove away the students and used that medical university campus as barracks. Today, Haiti is embattled, very poor. But Haiti is very rich. The earthquake, everybody that knows some level of geology knows that wherever there is earthquake, it brings out rich minerals, and the land is usually very, very rich. And that's how Haiti was. It was the richest slave colony because of the fertility. The earthquake occurred because there are tectonic plates that meet there. They will keep meeting there. They will keep coming. They will not stop. But the payback is that the soil is fabulously rich. Now, that is the case of Haiti, embattled Igbo identifying people, part of the global Igbo. Events in Haiti also spilled over finally because the Haitians decided to free the slaves all over the world. That's how the Igbo mind was, the great Igbo spirit, to free, and they set out doing it. They empowered Simon Bolivar, after whom Bolivia is named today, who was fighting for liberation of South America, gave him weapons, gave him printing press for propaganda, gave him fighting men. And the only thing Haiti asked from them is wherever you free the slaves. That's how Latin America got independence. Behind the scene is the great Igbo spirit that freed Haiti and inspired Haiti to do so. Then once Haiti was freed, panic set in the United States of America, where again, the Igbo are the predominant group. And there's a reason for Igbo predominance in the United States of America. The reason is that the Igbo at home never sold their people. So that when the slavery started, west of the Niger, two slave empires rose. The Benin Empire, under the inspiration of Portugal, and the Oyo Empire, inspired by the Malians. Those are two slave empires. You find out the Oba of Lagos was threatening to throw the Igbo into lagoon. He's a Benin man, a slave agent. The Portuguese built a slave center in the lagoon in Lagos and named it after a Portuguese town called Lagos, which is Portuguese name for lagoons, and went and took Benin princes to be their chief agent there. If Africa has started punishing all the collaborators in this slave trade on this side, the Oba of Lagos would not dare say what he said. And we will get there one of these days. We're asking for reparation from the white man. And people here whose ancestors collaborated in the slave trade are walking around wanting their abomination. The British came here and repurposed some of the slave catchers as warrant chiefs, and their sons are calling themselves princesses today because we haven't got to the point where they will pay back, and they will when Grand Igbo catches up with them. So ultimately, the Igbo started revolting in the United States. And the most dramatic one was Nat Turner, who, after starting his revolt in Virginia, took the title of Odogwu Nat Turner. What he did is some of the things you find in Okonkwo and things fall apart, or like in Zogu. Also, there are characters of Igbo who do that kind of thing. They just start a process. It will consume their heads, like the Osuagwu did to Okonkwo did to Natonga. But the chain reaction cascaded into the American Civil War. And at the end, the American Civil War was very costly to America. They lost 620,000 men killed in battle for a population of 20 million. If you look at it today, with America at 330 million, and you divide by 20 and multiply by 600,000, it's like losing maybe 20 million men. The American Civil War was very, very costly to America. But the Igbo laid slaves also sent 200,000 men into the war. And they were fighting the roughest battles using their hands, bayonets, and their bodies as shields. They ended up crushing the slavers and freeing the slaves. That's how American slaves were freed by the great Igbo spirit.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Now, 1863, the slavery in America was ended by Lincoln, who made a proclamation. And then the British, who supported the slaveholders in the South, decided to translocate the slavery to West Africa, to Africa. And that's how they formed a constabulary called Global Hausa Constabulary, to which they specifically excluded Southerners, particularly, of course, Igbo. And they used this to conquer the Negro race and started exploiting us now in our home instead of taking us to work for them in the Americas. And of course, when they formed their colony here, we are now familiar with what Lugar wrote in his handover note. He said Igbos are industrials and religious, but for the purpose for which we are here, they must never be entrusted with power. So you see, the Haitians are embattled, the Black Americans are embattled, the Igbo at home are embattled, the Igbo world is embattled. So you see, that's actually the whole idea of the great Igbo spirit and the embattled Igbo world, or embattled world Igbo. And it's a question we have to realize, to reflect on, and begin to think of how to deal with it.
Thank you very much, Prof. You know, it is indeed very gratifying listening to you, you know, laying these foundations. Now, the question you have, the next question I was about to ask, you have already touched on it somewhat. That is that the Igbo spirit is still embattled. Now, be it in Haiti, be it in Nigeria, be it in America, you know, with the blacks in America, the Igbo spirit is embattled. Question is, what are the things that they globally and at home where they are in the southeast or in the eastern part of Nigeria, what are the things that ought to be taken into cognizance in order for this battle to be won?
Okay. The question to ask is whether we want to remain Igbo, which means maintaining the great Igbo spirit as our guardian spirit that is stand with truth and gentle with life. Or we want to say, okay, we have had enough over these years. Let us become slaves to enslavers. This is the question before us. And we cannot pretend about it. And there's no diplomacy about it. It is to confront this fact. Do we, after all these years, after 400 years, decide to be loyal to Grand Igbo, which is stand with truth and gentle with life, or ask those who have particular interests, as Lugard put it, that is not consistent with the Igbo spirit, to enslave us. And what was their interest? Why was Lugard here? They came here as armed robbers. Armed robbers. That's what imperialism is. And it was coded into law by the Romans. There is what is called usufructuary law. Use, to use, fruit, from fruit, the right of the man of might to use the fruit of the earth as it sees fit. So, you find if you are armed, and you can go and rumble anybody, and you are armed and strong enough to force that person not to recover his deed, then you are covered by the law. When these people came and we are going from village to village here, asking for who put his thumb on some piece of paper, they were actually asking people to sign off on the usufructuary law. Now, there is a so-called more insidious law, the law of mammon, the law of compound interest, which allows the white man to use compound interest like they use in Haiti. They say, okay, you pay 150 million florins, but it's a compound interest. So if you calculate it now, the equivalent in real terms will be trillions of dollars. So they used it, they lend you money. And if you say no, they shoot you and find your idiot brother who is clever, a useful idiot, and he will sign up. And let me tell you, I've told you how that affected the Haitians. Now see, how did it affect the Igbo? A short while ago, we circulated papers on the classified British documents saying that Britain planned war against Eastern region. And then to take place by or before 1958. And the war was later executed at the Biafra War. Now, there were three main reasons they planned that war. Although when the man that stopped it at that time, Governor Robert Stapleton, who was governor of Eastern region, was totally opposed to that war. He couldn't see the reason for it. And they asked them, why are you trying to make war against these people? And he said, they told him there's likely to be chaos or something like chaos before 1958. But now we know they had three reasons for planning that war. One, they were shocked that Eastern region started African continental bank because they expected from the outcome of World War II to give us a paper independence, then set up their banks here, and they'll be lending us money and we'll be working for them. But our boys, Bono GK particularly, that went to the United States of America, learned that money is what you produce. So he came here and then set up the Eastern Nigeria Marketing Board, from which he raised money and set up the bank, and this made the British mark. That is one reason. The second reason was the setting up of the University of Nigeria, which was set up on a paradigm to restore the dignity of man. It is important to take note of this paradigm. It's not small, because if you go and look at Haitian independence, they had adopted Igbo principles. One, they adopted Igbo civilization as the framework. They adopted Igbo principles. And one of them was the Igbo concept of the human being as mando, the beauty of life, the crown of creation, creation of inestimable value that you must always dignify to restore the dignity of man at Nsuka. You see, it is implicit in the idea of mando. And the Haitians, even when the French made their revolution at that time and talked of liberté, égalité, fraternité, freedom, freedom, brotherhood, and equality.
Equality.
But the Haitians fought for humanity. For humanity, they took it one step further and decided that all humans will be free. And this comes from the Igbo idea of mando, of human being as the crown of creation that must always be dignified. Of course, European culture hadn't arrived at that point at the time. They were in fact beat by a superior civilization. They didn't know what hit them. That is one. The other is, if you look at Haitian coat of arms, it has the palm tree. The palm tree is a symbol of synergism. It has no taproot, no king. But if you watch a storm in the Caribbean, you will see the palm waving in the wind. No iroko, no giant trees with taproot, or the palm tree. And it's the principle of Ikoha as against Iko, which was driving the Europeans. So when the Haitians mobilized against them on the principle of the Avotu force, they didn't know what hit them. Because it is difficult for people to appreciate what really happened. Because at that time, even when 900,000 African slaves had been taken to Haiti, at the time of their revolution, there were only 500,000. That's including all those people born over hundreds of years, which means more have died. You would have expected if they were reproducing to have 2 or 4 of that population. But the death rate in the slave business was horrible. And again, this is part of what favored the Igbo. The Igbo were dying at a slower rate, so that the proportion of Igbo that survived were higher, both in Haiti and in the United States. In fact, it was President Aristide that brought my attention to this in 2006. He said 38% of those brought were Igbo. But how everybody became Igbo, you know? And of course, it was also 38% to the United States. But the Igbo survived better than others. Just like they do in Nigeria now. People keep going, you know, you say, Northerners marry 51. Whoa. I worked as a resource person to the United Nations Fund for Population Education. The highest crude birth rate in Nigeria was in the northwest. Maybe 7 per woman or something like that. The lowest was in Southeast. But the highest population growth rate in Nigeria was in the Southeast, unless it changed in the last few years. Why? Because of those 7 children before the age of 5, 3 are dead or more. But before an Igbo child dies, it is negotiated both in heaven and on earth. So that more than canceled the advantage of high birth rate. People don't know this fact. And this has been in Igbo culture, and it showed, I circulated recently a science journal article wondering about this phenomenon. Oladekwano talked about it, that Igbo had better survival. And this is the principle of Onyagala 1 year. This came from the idea of the Igbo Erima system, where the community was a dynamic network. And again, I have to go back and thank the Oni of Ife, who in 2009 called on the Igbo that as the people of Obatala and the Fall of Kola North, take up again your role as Igbo Grammar. Now, so you see, we have all these problems, and we resist. And it is a problem we now have. So that if you go to Haiti, the people that led the Haitian revolution were philosopher kings. They were Dibia. The first man was a man called Macondor, who lived before the formal revolution started. The next was a bookman. The next was Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint was a house Negro. In fact, that's part of what finally cost him his life. So people didn't really know, but he knew his background. And to ensure the African people that he came from a Dibia kindred lineage, he changed his name from Toussaint Breda to Toussaint Louverture. Louverture meant the insightful one in Igbo onye na-ahụ ụzọ, which is what the Dibia are. Well, when the French tricked him and he went to France to negotiate in diplomacy, quote unquote, the man that took over, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and finally won the independence, was under the tutelage of a Dibia, a woman called Abreya Toya. And when this woman died, she was given state burial in Haiti, and she's a national hero, a heroine. She still is. But it will take a person who understands the African system and his reliance on the principle of after God is Dibia, on the leadership of the thinker, the visionary. But the Europeans were led by warrior kings. Africans were led by philosopher kings. That's why they were defeated. They wouldn't know it because their eyes didn't get there. And of course, when the Haitians mobilized on the principle with visionaries leading them and so on, there was no way they could not win. And they won. It is also part of the problem the Igbo now have. We have a situation where Ofeke, people who are blind, are leading the Igbo nation. Scientists are now telling us that there are 2 brains. The belly brain, 10 billion neurons. The head brain, 10 billion neurons. Ofeke is the stomach brain predominates. He thinks with his stomach.
And they call them
thinks with his head.
And they call them stomach infrastructure.
Yes, the Dibia thinks it is a vision. And that's the problem we have in Igbo land now.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that erudite explanation elaborately that you have done. Prof, my next line of thought, or my next question will be, Obviously, we have seen what has happened in Haiti. We have seen, there was a time when there was crisis in Haiti. We saw people like the former governor of Anambra State, Peter Obi, when they donated, and actually, I think they flew into Haiti. We saw people like the former governor of Imo State, Rochas Okorocha, with Red Cross when intervention was made. Now, do you think moving forward that we have enough synergy with Haiti and our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean? And if we don't, what do you think we need to do moving forward in order to cement that liberation that the forefathers had done many centuries ago?
Okay. In fact, it is to learn from the Haitians. We started with the dance, Nuse Igbo, we are Igbo. They have that consciousness. They live by it. There is a man called Akan Dende, who called in 2019 for the world Igbo to join together. He's a Haitian traditionalist, and revive what our ancestors left for us. They have that consciousness. During the Civil War, the United Nations, the big powers using UTAN, the then Secretary General of the United Nations, wanted to stop Haiti from recognizing Biafra. The president, Francois Duvalier, wrote to them and told them, under no circumstance will they fail to solidarize with the Igbo people, who played a capital role in the glorious epic of 1804, the Haitian Revolution. But our people here lack the consciousness. Some years ago, I made effort to get the Minister of Culture here in Imo to invite M.S. Caesar, the co-founder of Negritude, to come and give a talk here. People didn't see the import. He himself went out of his way to send documents to Igbo scholars through Professor Abiola Irele. And the documents ended in the hands of Professor Tochukwu, who took it to the US. Instead of organizing a symposium, inviting MS Caesar. Because that is how people get to know each other. They'll be making effort. We are the people who are not making effort. We are looking for hearing, and the reason is that the British came here and privileged the Ofeke. You see leaders, and you think that the only snack Igbo leaders now eat is Indoseed. The capsule given to rats to disable their nervous system. Those are brothers have been studied in the United States. I met students from Haiti. I met people from Haiti. I had a girlfriend whose grandparents were Haiti, and they said we must marry. But that's hell for another day. So this is how we must sit down and change this paradigm, because if not, we are lost.
Okay.
In
Prof, thank you.
2009,
finish your
the
thought.
United States Army made an announcement, one General Benjamin Frickley, that people from particular nations, ethnic groups, who wanted to become American citizens, we are welcome to join the US Army to speed up the process. And then Africa, the only nation mentioned was the Igbo nation, the great Igbo nation. That's how we evaluated. When they built the Igbo village in Virginia, that's a recognition. What are we doing to utilize it to bring together the black race, which was the implicit mandate? It wasn't given up to us personally. It's on a representative basis. Must it be just every once in a while we go there? I have this thing, instead of building institute to bring the great Igbo nation worldwide together. That's the only survival, interestingly. That's the only survivor. Those of us who fought in the Biafra war know that the best khaki we wore, everybody was wearing bath, something made of, I don't know what that was, whether it was toilet tissue or something painted green. But the best khaki was sent to us by Haiti. So, if we want to survive, it's a survival issue. Then the greater Igbo nation, the world Igbo, the Haitians, the Black Americans, the Isu Igbo in Eastern Nigeria and other people who joined them, the Igbo Moku people at Ileife, the Ugbo people in Western Nigeria, and all the ancient people. Because Igbo-ness is not a sanguinary thing. It's not something by an ancient grandfather. No, it's an ideology. Ideology represented by what we call Ebo. The ideology of solving problems before they arrive. A person who understands problem and engages in Igbambo, acting to block Mkpa, is recognized as Igbo. So when Mkpa comes, he'll block it. That's by definition an Igbo. If Igbo finds somebody who they say does not recognize Mkpa, he does not qualify to be Igbo. It's an ideology. That's why it was easy for the rest of the black race to fall behind this ideology.
Thank you very much, Prof. I like the concept of Igbo Mkpa. You know, that concept is indeed a very Igbo concept. Now, Prof, before we begin to wrap up this conversation, you know, there is something slightly related to this that I've been meaning to ask you. Now, you mentioned about the Biafra War. At the same time, you talked about the Great Igbo, which I've written down here, that part of what you're submitting here today is the concept of a global Igbo nation. Now, if I put that concept vis-a-vis the conversations we have had so far, my question thereof would be, Prof, if we're talking about this and we have our people also who talk about Biafra and some talk about Igbo, sometimes it appears it is the case of a child and the firstborn who comes first. Some say it is a case of chicken and the egg. Prof, my question then is, putting all these things together, which one do you think is old and which one should stick? Some people believe in the word Biafra. Some say no, it is Igbo because Igbo is original to us. Biafra is Portuguese. That has to do with a 1710 declaration from a city of Mafra in Portugal. Question then is, which one is, which one is to be followed in this case?
Well, The question wasn't quite clear to me. Yeah, the sound was muffled a little. But if I understand you, you might be saying if we wanted to prioritize the Igbo, or we prioritize world Igbo, or what was like the question? I didn't quite get it.
Can you hear me again? Can you hear me clearly? Yeah.
Hello?
Yes. Can you hear me, Prof? Can you hear me now?
Okay, I hear you a little better.
Okay. So my question is, in terms of priority here, we have, two different school of thoughts in the Great Igbo nation today. Therein arises the argument, the world Igbo and Biafra, which is more authentic to a people. Some argue that Igbo predates Biafra, that came from Mafra, a word coined in 1710. My question then to you, what's your take on such argument?
Well, like the Oni said again, Igbo is an ancient civilization of the same age as Kemet of Egyptian civilization. We are a primary civilization. A civilization, by definition, is people who found settlements and they have rules to live together so that everybody is comfortable enough to stay there. They are civil to each other. That's the idea of civilization. And primary civilizations establish crops on which the civilization is based. There is no doubt that the Igbo established yam and palm. So I call our own a yam palm civilization. And the scholars have found out that this at least has lasted 5,000–6,000 years. So the idea of talking of Biafra and Igbo and so it doesn't even, in fact, arise. Doesn't arise. Biafra is a name that when the Europeans came, the Portuguese came, found it on the ground in this general area and was adopted in 1967. At that time, there was a culture of adopting ancient African names, like Gold Coast adopted Ghana, which existed. Some people adopted Mali, and so on. That's what was going on. And then we looked for what to adopt. In fact, even Nigeria, there was a time when it was suggested it should be adopted Songhai, but it didn't work out. So that's why we adopted Biafra. But Biafra is not in isolation, like I pointed out, to events in Haiti, to events in the United States, the American Civil War and follow-up events. Definitely not to the British or to the French or to those who see the Igbo, who see Igbo Grammon as a dangerous spirit. So whatever we do must be done within this context. And not only did actually the Igbo become the rallying point in Haiti that led Nuse Igbo, that led to Igbo Grammon, that led to Igbo Grammon Leke Igbo. Igbo Grammon Leke Igbo was the slogan of the Haitian Revolution. The Igbo never surrender Igbo sovereignty. That was the slogan of the Haitian Revolution. So the Igbo also founded Pan-Africanism. The first person that used that term was Olaude Equiano. And the first person that used the term Pan-Africanism was another Igbo called Blyden, whose grandson was the first orator of the University of Nigeria. Although the term he used was Pan-Ethiopianism, which is an equivalent term. So whatever the Igbo do, they must do within the context of Pan-Africanism, because we have the mandate of 1791. Some people call themselves great here and here. We are the only people who don't even know that we are called great a long time ago. And it wasn't called quietly. If you go on YouTube and Google Igbo Grammar, you'll be shocked. Google Igbo Lele, you'll be shocked the number of music playing to these people who don't even know who they are, that we are great. We are great. So the specific issue of Biafra actually as a defensive mechanism, which is what it was. I already tell you, Ojukwu didn't know, Zik didn't know, we now know by hindsight, by reading British declared document, that Britain had planned war against us. And that Britain did two things. They wanted to deactivate the Igbo and deactivate the Middle Belt. And they sent secret memos to the Willing Commission to this effect. They said if Middle Belt was carved out as a separate region from Northern region, they will not grant Nigeria independence. They now said a secret memo that the Willing Commission should create an Ejo, a reverse region for 900,000 Ejo. Now, that thing was not created, and nobody talked about it because the Willing Commission saw the argument and the data as absurd. They threw it out. In the case of the North, the Willing Commission felt so strongly that they insisted that if North had to remain one, because Britain said they needed the dominant North to control Nigeria as part of informal British Empire. They now said if North had to remain one, there must be no Sharia. Mabelo signed off on it. Those who introduced Sharia in northern Nigeria in the year 2000, Ame Yerima and Co. destroyed the formal basis for one North. But they like to eat their cake and have it. But in the case of the memo to create reverse region, the commission said the data we have shows that Rivers province has 703,000 people, not 900,000. And we have 45,000 Ejo in Western Nigeria, called Western Ejo. Where did you get all this? And that of this 703,000 in Rivers province, there were 150,000 Ogoni, 250,000 Ejo in Brass, and Degema divisions. So the name went into analysis, details. 150,000 Ogoni in Ogoni division, 250,000 Ejo in Brass and Degema divisions, 303,000 Igbo in Ahoda and Port Harcourt division. Where did you get 900,000? But you see what the minorities in the East at that time asked for was for Calabar, Ugoja, and Rivers province. So if they actually wanted Britain, if they wanted, would have promoted the creation of that. But they didn't want that. They wanted to carve out a province they thought they would manipulate the people they were calling the Jaw, in which now they were carved in Ogoni, carved in Igbo, and take them for granted. But actually, when people talk of a Jaw and try to talk of them as alien from Igbo, it is nonsensical.
Prof, I think at this point, Prof, I intervene. I would schedule a different meeting where we will have much time to look at the various Igbo tribes or nationalities that somewhat feel they are no longer Igbo or they run away from their Igbo-ness. That is a lecture on its own, because I know I have had this conversation with you privately. I know it is one area that we must look into. Prof, but before we round up, I want to ask you this. You alluded to it during your opening presentation. You talked about the Igbo intellectualism vis-a-vis the concept of Dibia in Igbo intellectualism. But at the middle of your conversation, you broke the table by saying that what we have in the cadre of Igbo leadership today are efulefus, in your words. In this case, does that mean that those we have in the cadre of Igbo leadership has departed from Dibias to those who you call, sorry, not efulefu, who you call Ofekes?
Okay.
Where did we get it wrong, and how can we fix it?
Okay, I actually didn't use the word eflef.
No, I said Ofeke. Sorry,
a Westrel.
you used Ofeke.
But you distinguish between Ofeke and Dibia. Yeah. Ofeke is the ordinary person. 99% of the people are Ofeke. They are not eflef, not all of them. So only a few people, 0.1%, are Dibia. So you distinguish between Ofeke and Dibia. I just said the Igbo have always been led traditionally. Like if you go to the case of, say, Georgia, what he did was to bring the best Dibia in Igbo land to Kobo, and then Daogo joined the guild. And Bonny then was, the British had to, fighting Bonny had to get rid of Awanta, the Dibia in charge. But they monitored him and trapped him and drowned him in the Bonny River. So what I'm telling you is actually Igbo culture. It's not just to make mouth, but you see what has been going on is that since British time, outside forces who are against the Igbo spirit have been picking and privileging those who are not worthy to be leaders among the Igbo. And this is the heart of the crisis we have been going through for a long time, particularly since the Civil War. We had to face it or we'll be lost. And you can see now, that is why the Falcon cannot hear the Falcon. The youth have looked at the elders and say, well, we don't know who you are. But even they themselves, actually 10 years ago, I delivered a lecture at Imo State University, which I titled Igbo Youth, that be Igbo, in which I tried to get them to understand the ideology, the principle governing the great Igbo spirit. That just having an Igbo name and Igbo parents is not enough to be Igbo. If not, we will not be great people. So it is that British engineered, and then he set up the process of now picking all kinds of characters and privileging them as Igbo leader, where the Igbo leaders are suffering. Let me tell you, use myself as an example. From childhood, I've been a leadership type. I was a prefect in school. I was president of our student association in America. And when I came back, you know, about identifying with Ohanes and so on, you will find traditional Igbo that Brigadier Njoko took me to Obasanjo and said, this person, I want you to put you in a position to exercise leadership. Professor Chimerikoku took me to Buhari through PTF and said, look, I want this person for you to put him, if it's here, things will work. Onyenso Nwachukwu invited me. I was attending Ohanese issues, but I wasn't involved in leadership campaign, and so they invited me to take up leadership of Ohanese in Imo State. Amnanu Okebu came when I was at Harvard and bargained with the then provost, the then uncle who's still alive, that I've been not given administrative job so that I can help lead our people. This is how the Igbo system worked. And when Ojukwu saw me, you know, that's how I ended up delivering his 70th birthday lecture. And when I ran for Hanese Secretary General, and Rocha Sokrocha, who was then governor, said I had to work with him, and I said, no, I will work for Hanese. I will not work two ways. And he said they will not support me. General Achuzia called me and interviewed me for a whole day at Concord. I didn't know he was interviewing me. Then later he asked them to support me. They said no, that I'm too stubborn. But Achuzia held on to me. I was the person who, from his bedside at FMC Asaba, called Arinzawogu to get in contact with Governor Obiano, who sent the health commissioner to take off his bills, and so unfortunately he died. So I'm telling you this because Igbo have a very good recruitment system for true leadership. We don't just come anybody, you come out and you join one court or something, you become leader.
Now, question then, Prof. If Igbos have this through recruitment process tested over the years and centuries, question again, Prof, is why do we have fewer DBS in leadership? Because DBS, unquote, for those of you who may not understand the context DBS is being used here, DBS are seers and leaders. They are the intellectual powerhouses. Why is it that we have failed to have more DBS leaders?
Oh, we have not failed. We are suppressed. Okay, let me tell you what's going on. In Haiti, I told you how Aristide was removed for trying to serve his people. And along the line, the Americans decided to install a singer, Wycliffe Jean. You know him?
Mm-hmm.
An American citizen. His papers were not correct. Then they look for a dancer, Martelly. It is Martelly that after his government put in the one, Jovenel Moise, who has just been assassinated. People will blame the Haitians. It is not the Haitians. It is those who have guns on our head. That is part of why the global Igbo must be conscious of this thing. That this is happening here, this is happening in Haiti, this is happening in the United States of America, this is happening everywhere. And we must find a way of breaking the jinx.
Thank you very much, Professor Chidi Osuagwu, for joining me this evening. It has been an hour, 15 minutes conversation with you. I thoroughly enjoyed every single second of this interview with you. I would be having you back again on similar topic. Now, the takeaway that I do have from our conversation is that you are sending out a clear signal to global Igbo to be at alert. I hope I summarized it quite correct. Prof, did you hear me? Yes, did you hear me?
I hear you now.
Okay. I said, in summary here, before we round up, I take it that your message to us today, in remembrance of these 14th, in your world, the Global Igbo Day, that what you are, the message you are passing to Global Igbo is to be at alert.
We must solidarize. We must act in concert. We must, if you go to Haiti, their basic principle of self-knowledge. In fact, people need to get to know Haiti. They are the only people living like ancient Igbo. We need to know ourselves, know our neighbors, know our brothers, know the way we are. And I hope that finally you will play the jubilation song of the Haitian Revolution. Ibolele.
That will be done, obviously, Professor Chidi Osuagwu. Once more, thank you for being my guest here. It has been an hour of immense and intense, knowledge transfer. Reading the comment section, many people here, basically saying that we shall, or rather, I send their greetings to you for your time in delivering these powerful words to us this evening. Again, my viewers, thank you for being part of it.
Thank you very much.
For those of you who haven't subscribed to this platform, please do, be it on Facebook, Periscope, YouTube, subscribe, and also follow us on our various social media handle. It has been my pleasure to speak to Professor Chidi Osuagwu. Professor Chidi Osuagwu, for many of you who do not know, is the Chairman, African Future Earth Committee, and former
chairman.
Okay.
Left that position.
Okay, thank you very much. Chidi Osuagwu is the former Chairman, African Future Earth Commission, and also the former Chairman, Ohaneze Ndibo, Imo State. Again, he is, Professor, correct me if I'm wrong, a microbiologist by training. So, and sorry, you wanted to say something, Prof?
Biochemistry.
Sorry. Okay, biochemistry by training. And it's, I would want to employ the Prof to avail me another time with him where we will discuss and go deep in the concept of Dibia and Igbo intellectualism. I know that, Prof, when I take this conversation offline and I come back to you for us to fix a date, that we have to come again and do justice to this. And that's on that note, I will say once more, thank you very much for being part of this program, Prof.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, once more. On that note, we will be ending with this Ibolele as requested by Professor. Once more, thank you.